In this video, I'm going to give you 10 tips to help you make your wildlife photography more impactful. Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. In this video, I'm going to tell you 10 ways to make your wildlife photography stronger. In some cases, these are things that I've talked about on this channel before, but that's okay because they are all worth repeating. If there are any videos that I made previously that talk about some of these topics in more detail, I'll provide links to those in the description below. So let's get started. Tip number 1 is to embrace challenging environments. Sometimes photographers don't go out to photograph because they think that the conditions are not optimal for photography. It may be because of the light, perhaps there's not enough light, or they feel that there's too much light, perhaps that the light is too harsh, or perhaps it's the weather, it might be raining or it might be snowing. The thing is, it's so important to get out there no matter what the conditions, and it's not just because that if you're not out there, you may miss some interesting animal behaviors. The thing is that if you brave those challenging conditions, those are the times when you may see and capture some really interesting and unique things. So let me give you a few examples. I was out looking for wildlife and it was pouring rain. Fortunately, I had wet weather gear for myself and for my cameras. I saw a red fox carrying a snowshoe hare. That's an incredible opportunity, something I had only dreamed of previously. And I followed this fox for quite some distance, and it was pretty tough going. It was pouring rain. I had to follow the fox over some rough terrain. There was wet sand, wet mud. It was tough, but if I had not been out there, I would not have had this incredible opportunity. And what's even better is not only did I see this and get some images, but I followed the fox back to a den that I didn't even know about previously. So I managed to capture images like this. And in this image here, you can see just how soaked through with rain the fox was. An incredible opportunity that I would not have gotten if I had not stayed out in the rain. I have another rain story for you. I was at a lake and I was photographing birds. It started pouring rain, really bucketing down. There was a little crocodile there that was in the water, and it was so interesting because it stayed at the surface of the water even though it was just bucketing down rain. And it did finally submerge about 5 minutes later, but until it went down, I had the great opportunity to capture many images of it. And it was tough, and I'm glad that I had a little bit of time to do it because I had to manually focus through all of the rain. A great opportunity, a very unique opportunity that I wouldn't have had if I had just packed up when it started raining. I was in Iceland and looking for Arctic foxes, and I actually didn't see many Arctic foxes, and when I did see them, it was a pretty tough shoot because there was not a lot of light and the snow was blowing really hard. The camera was having a lot of trouble focusing, and very challenging conditions, but the images that I got, really the best ones certainly from that shoot, are the ones where it was the toughest to shoot because they show the conditions, all the blowing snow that the foxes have to deal with out there. I had some incredible opportunities to photograph at night, and these are challenging conditions. Even when you have a little bit of illumination, as I did with some floodlights low to the ground, you have to shoot with very slow shutter speeds in order to get any reasonably clean images, even if you're using big apertures. And it's not only hard to shoot, but it's hard to even see what's going on because the darkness is you can't even see sort of that far in the darkness beyond the immediate area where you have the lighting set up, and the wildlife just appears out of nowhere, literally out of the darkness like this. Here's an image I took of an elephant at the same location in the same kinds of conditions. And it's also when doing this kind of night photography that one morning I had the very good fortune to photograph this yellow-fronted canary. So this is just before sunrise. The sun had not even really come up yet, and or maybe it was just peering over the horizon. So again, pretty tough conditions to shoot in because of such little light, but totally worth the opportunities. Here's an image I took of a brown bear in Alaska. This was very late in the day. The sun was just setting. It was quite intense sunlight, but it was quite difficult with this backlighting to expose these shots. But again, totally worth it. Now, here's a different kind of challenge. I had the good fortune to photograph this cheetah, and the cheetah was resting in this area where there was a lot of grass and a lot of brush and a lot of thorns. So it was tough even just to walk in there. And everywhere I tried to put my camera, it was obscured by something. But the images that I took really show those challenges. They show the environment in which the cheetah was in, and they show that how difficult it was for me to get my camera in there. So great opportunities again. My second tip for you is not just to focus on a specific species. So even when we go out sometimes and we are looking for a particular species, if you see another species, and there are opportunities, or there are occasions too sometimes when you go out and you're looking for a specific species and you don't even see that species, but you see something else. When you see some other kind of animal, regardless of what the situation may be, you should always try to take advantage of that opportunity. And the thing is that you can get great images regardless of what species it is that you're taking photographs of. If you have interesting behavior, or if you have great light or interesting scenery or environment, if you can tell a story, these are all the things that matter much more than the specific species that you're trying to photograph. So let me give you a few examples. When I was in Alaska one time, I think it was around the same time when I took that photo that I just showed you of a bear, I was in the water and this family of merganser ducks came along. And it was a great opportunity. And I wasn't there to photograph ducks, but I totally took advantage of that opportunity. I was at a waterhole late at night doing some night photography, and I was there to photograph animals that were coming to the waterhole to drink. There was a rhino beetle, a tiny, tiny little beetle on a rock in the middle of the water. I was not there to look for beetles, but this was an interesting opportunity and I took advantage of it. That crocodile that I mentioned before that I photographed in the rainstorm, I was not there to photograph crocodiles, I was there to photograph birds, but I saw this crocodile and it was a great opportunity, so I took advantage of it. I want to talk to you now about something that's really important, and that is putting the wildlife first. Often photographers get really absorbed in what they're doing and really caught up in the moment, and sometimes they do things that are not in the best interests of the wildlife. And it's really important for the welfare of the animals to put them first before our photography. We're just there to observe, and doing things like pursuing the animals and harassing the animals and surrounding the animals and following the animals into places where they expect to be safe without people there. These are all things that are really important to be respectful of and to keep in mind. The thing is that even if you do these things and you manage to get some images, those images are not going to be good images because the animals won't be relaxed and they won't be exhibiting their natural behavior in their natural environment. So it's always really important to think about the welfare of the animals, and all of the images I will show you, in any image that I take that you'll see of mine, it's always taken with the animals in a relaxed state, and those are the best kinds of images. My next tip is to be very particular about your position and your perspective. So what I'm talking about is where you shoot from, where you position your camera, and how you aim your camera. One of the things I talk about on this channel a lot is the importance of getting down low. Now, it's not always that being down low is the best position, but it's often the case. And it really can make a big difference. And especially when you're talking about wildlife that's fairly small, if you are up high, there's a good chance that you may scare off the wildlife, and you'll end up taking an image that has a perspective where the subject looks very small in the image. And if you want to bring the viewer into the subject's world, you want to get down low, and also by doing that you can make the subject appear larger in the image. So let me give you a few examples here. When I photographed this bear, I was in the water. So I'm actually submerged in the water up to my armpits, wearing waders, and that allows me to get this perspective where I can put my lens right across the water like that. When I photograph this black crake, which is standing in the water, again, I have my lens right across the surface of the water. When I photographed this Arctic fox, I was on a mountainside with this beautiful tundra landscape, and I got down as low as I could, made myself very, very flat. And the fox is very small, and so I didn't want to appear as a threat in any way. And in fact, when I got down that low, the fox was curious, and it came quite close. And by getting down low, I get to see all of those details, those beautiful details of the tundra landscape, and I was able to incorporate those in my images. When I photographed this polar bear, I was in a zodiac floating in the water and came right up to the edge of the ice, and I'm actually photographing up to the polar bear. And by doing that, I'm also making the polar bear seem a lot more imposing, and that fits with what we think about when we think about a polar bear. We think about a polar bear as a big, powerful creature, and so having this kind of perspective helps to reinforce that. When I photographed this cheetah, this is the same cheetah that I showed you an image of before. This image was taken lying down on the ground. The cheetah was lying down, but I was also lying down. I was as flat as I could get. I had my face actually in the dirt, and I had my lens right across the surface of the ground there. And when I photographed this bearded seal, I was in a zodiac, so floating in the water, but I actually leaned out of the boat, way over the edge of the boat, and got my lens right down against the surface of the water so I could see that water and get the water and the ice and this kind of perspective. My next tip for you is to show the scene and not just the subject. It's very easy to get caught up in showing the subject and trying to fill the frame with the subject. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. You just don't want to do that all the time. If you do that all the time, a lot of your images will start to look the same. And if you're not showing the environment, you're not really telling the full story. And you might as well be taking those images at a zoo. So let me show you a few examples, starting with some images that are quite tightly cropped. So these are cases where the wildlife was close, and in some cases came closer, and I was not able to either zoom out or move back in any way, and so I ended up having to crop parts of the subject in the image. This is two Cape buffalo locking horns at night. Now this lion came up really, really close, and the thing was, I was using a 400 prime, and I was in crop mode, and the lion came up. It was about 6 feet away and looked me right in the eyes, and I actually got thrown off for a moment that I forgot to go out of crop mode, so I ended up with this really, really tight image. So with images like this, you know, there's nothing wrong with them. Here's another one with a cheetah, the same cheetah that I showed you an image of before, and this was taken with a 135mm lens, very tight crop. Nothing wrong with this image, but taking an image like this, where you can see so much of the environment and the subject is really small in the environment, is a very different kind of an image and really tells a completely different story than if I had just zoomed all the way in. And here you can get to see all the beautiful fall colors and the reflections in the water. Same with this image here of a bear cub. And here's the thing, even if you are taking an image and the environment is not so interesting, if there's even a shot like this where there's no interesting texture or color in the environment, just giving the subject space, especially if it's moving or looking in a certain direction, giving it space to breathe in that image is just so important. Okay, my next tip for you is to watch for animal behavior. Now, of course, we want to capture interesting behavior. But the thing is, when you study and you learn about animal behavior, it also will give you a clue as to what might happen next. And it's not just the behavior of the animal that you're trying to photograph. Sometimes it's the behavior of other animals that are reacting to the presence of the animal that you're looking to photograph. So if you're looking for predators, for example, looking for the behavior of the potential prey of those predators is something that you want to be doing, and will give you a clue as to the presence of the predators in the area and what they might be doing. And the thing is that a lot of the shots that are really interesting are the ones where you can capture some interesting behavior, and that could be anything. Let me give you a few examples. So here, that bearded seal that I showed you before, it just was spreading its fingers, if you can call them that, in its flipper. A really interesting behavior that I managed to capture. That fox that I mentioned before that had the snowshoe hair, it was having to stop all the time to rest a little bit and to reposition the hair in its mouth, and that was a great opportunity to grab a shot, and I got this bonus where it was actually looking right at me. Now this bear was walking along this log in this beautiful lush green environment, and I thought it would disappear. It would climb over the logs and disappear into the background, and it did actually do exactly that. But what I was really hoping was that before it did that it would turn around and take one final glance at me, and it did exactly that. And for me, that's the money shot. So you always want to be looking for these very specific moments to capture. This little Arctic fox was walking around this hillside, and I got lots of images of it doing various things, but this one where it was almost talking to me, that was a really unique moment to capture. Now this bear was fishing, and that was interesting, and I have some images of that, but when it got out of the water and all the water droplets were dripping off the bear and the light was hitting the bear in this way, that to me was a really great time to grab some images. Now this is a squacco heron, and it was hunting for fish. It was prowling around in the water and looking very intensely in the water, and it stuck its head out through the grass, and to me that was a really interesting behavior to capture. My next tip for you is to use your images to tell a story. Now this is a big topic and something that we could spend some time on, and I should make a separate video about this. There are lots of ways to do this. Sometimes you can tell the story in one image. Sometimes you need a number of different images to tell the story. And when you do that, often what you want to do too is to take different kinds of images. Sometimes you want to take a a wide image showing the environment. Sometimes you want to take more of a portrait image that's a little bit tighter, that focuses on the subject, and then sometimes you'll want to take images that are really close up and show some specific detail. There's lots of ways to do this. Whenever you are in any kind of situation and you see a subject, even if at the time you don't think that it might be an interesting image to capture, just go ahead and capture all the different aspects that you can of the situation, of that scenario, of that subject doing different things. And these are all things that you can, even if you're not thinking about telling the story at the time, or not thinking about how you'll tell the story, taking all the images and then being able to bring them back later on, and at a later point in time think about how you tell the story, that can also work as well. So as an example, here are some images I took of some bears that I was very fortunate to see playing together on a beach. They were wrestling, and I was with them for at least half an hour. And during that time, I took a ton of images. And in fact, I just licensed a whole bunch of these images for publication in newspapers. And I'm so glad that I took all of the images that I did, because that allowed me to tell the story of them doing all the various things that they were doing. They were playing on the beach, and sometimes down on all fours like that. Sometimes they were up on their hind legs wrestling like this. They were sometimes then going out into the surf and throwing water around, and there was like water droplets and sand spraying up into the air. So in order to tell that story, I needed to capture a lot of different images and all the different moments and the different perspectives and so forth. Now, one thing that's really interesting is the idea of not telling the full story. By doing that, you're leaving some questions hanging, and that can be a really powerful thing. So with an image like this, where this elephant was spraying water and mud everywhere and making a great big mess, it's interesting to just throw that image out there and not have any other images, and not even to tell all the details of the story, and just to let the viewer wonder what happened next. Okay, my next tip for you is to learn how to create visual flow in your images. So visual flow is the idea of drawing the viewer's attention to a point in the image, and then having their attention move to another point in the image, and then perhaps another point after that. So you want to direct where the viewer looks. And to do this, it means that you have to understand what will draw the viewer's attention and what will distract the viewer. And this can be done in a number of different ways. It might be compositional elements in the image. It might be areas of light or dark. It might be colors. One of the things that can be really helpful is to learn how to shoot and how to think in black and white. Even if you are not planning to publish your images in black and white, just thinking in black and white and working in black and white can be a really helpful thing to help you improve your compositional technique and your editing technique and your exposing technique and so forth. So let me just give you a few examples of some black and white photography. So here's a lion cub, and you can see just how I've made use of the light and the dark here, and the sun was very low here and just coming across at a particular kind of an angle, and there's very heavy shadow on one side of the cub. Here's another image of that bear that came out of the water and was dripping water droplets everywhere. Now here's an Arctic hare. Now this was actually taken in very bright light, very harsh light in the middle of the day, but the hare was in this area where there was some dark background, and so I underexposed this and really wanted to I didn't do it all in the camera. I did some of it later in post because I wanted to have options with the image, and the most important thing was just to capture as much dynamic range as possible. But I really wanted to work this in black and white and really make it all about just the compositional elements and the areas of light and dark. All right, my next tip for you is to really spend time practicing and honing and refining your technique. A lot of people don't think about going out and practicing their photography, but that is something that you absolutely should do. We have to employ so many techniques when we're photographing wildlife, and you really want to have all of those under your fingers. You want to have it all committed to muscle memory so that when the time comes for you to capture very specific things at a very specific point in time, like when I was photographing these puffins that are very, very fast, very difficult to photograph, and I was in a boat and the boat was bobbing up and down, and you can see from the shutter speed here the kind of shutter speed that you have to use to freeze the action. You know, that is not a time to be fumbling around and trying to figure things out. You just want to have everything so that you're basically on autopilot, right? And you can just shoot away and not have to even think much about things. When I photographed this heron that was flying past, from the time that I saw this heron to the time that I took this shot was probably only about 3 seconds. And I was actually not prepared for this at all. I was actually photographing bears. There was actually a bear that was in the vicinity, and I have another image showing the heron and the bear in the same image. So I had to quickly adjust, and then when the bird took off, and then when it sliced its wingtip through the water like this, that was the money shot. And I just had to have my everything, you know, worked out, right? Like I always have to be sort of thinking ahead as well, trying to plan for what the possibilities might be and getting ready for that. So it's really important to just practice as much as you can. And sometimes you don't even have to go out and actually practice when there's wildlife in order to do that. Sometimes you can even just at home practice certain techniques. And finally, I want to talk to you a little bit about gear and the importance of attaining mastery over your gear. It doesn't really matter what kind of gear you have. Now, obviously, the gear can be helpful sometimes, but the gear can also be a hindrance, especially if you don't have mastery over it. So what's really important is that you really find gear that works for you and that you use it in a way that works for you so that it enables you to do your best work and doesn't get in the way. So I hope you found these tips helpful and that you're able to think about them and incorporate them into your wildlife photography. If you want to provide any feedback or if you have any questions about any of these things, feel free to post in the comment section below, or you can post a message on my Discord server where there's the opportunity to have a more in-depth chat. Regardless, I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.